Anytime now. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast. And I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Zayas God. He's rocking the fluffy, beautiful hair over there. I'm rocking the balding, almost no hair over here. And we are going to be talking about the movie that describes my personality, lovely, dark, and deep. There we go. So, anyway, Danny, do you know where this title comes from for this movie?
I've heard this expression before, but I'll let you do a deeper dive into it.
Oh, deeper dive into Lovely, Dark, and Deep. Yeah, it's basically from a Robert Frost quote. It's from like one of his most famous poems. And it's very simple. It just goes, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep and miles
Yeah.
to go
What
before I
else is
sleep.
that? What else is that? I have miles to go before I sleep. That's from. Oh God, that's gonna haunt me now.
Uh-oh. Well, there's a lot of fucking haunted people in this movie, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yes, as he drinks his coffee over there. This movie was written and directed by Teresa Sutherland. This is their first feature film. They have made a whole bunch of shorts, and the shorts seem to all kind of have a theme. Have you looked into any of those, Danny?
I haven't, but I do know that she wrote The Wind, which is a movie that Chris, Future Boy Chris, our friend who has joined, original Lastercast member and joined us the other day for our True Detective finale recap. He's been singing the praises of The Wind for years. And she wrote that. And she was also on the writing team for a series called Midnight Mass, created by Mike Flanagan.
Holy shit. Okay. That was weird because I was looking through her IMDb and I didn't see that shit. That's fucking crazy. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I think she was on the writing team because I
Gotcha.
think, yeah,
Well, so The Wind, right? I just want to read a description of this movie that Chris likes so much. A plainswoman faces the harshness and isolation of the untamed land in the western frontier of the late 1800s. Then there is The Winter, which The Wind came out in 2018. The Winter came out in 2012. And The Winter goes, when her husband is dragged into the darkness, a woman must survive the elements of frontier Kansas. So there's definitely a theme with Teresa Sutherland's movies, wouldn't you say?
yeah, very nature driven, very kind of feels like old fashioned British folk horror,
Ooh,
which I know you are a big fan of.
Edward Stone.
I got a lot of those vibes in this. Um, even like the quoting of the poetry. This movie felt like some of the movies that we've covered on this channel. It reminded me a little bit of Brightwood, a movie
Yes,
that we
yes,
covered that
yes.
had like a sci-fi time loop element to it, and
Yep.
this also kind of felt almost Stranger Things like with like the upside down and like
Oh,
there being like a world kind of adjacent to ours. Um, I there was a lot of this movie that I really enjoyed. There's not a lot of dialogue,
no.
and there's a lot of really gorgeous cinematography. I think this movie filmed in Portugal,
It did. It did. It did. Yes.
and because like I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself like, wow, like I'd love to travel and like hike these paths, and then I'm like, oh, it was filmed in Portugal. Okay, I was thinking it was filmed somewhere in like the Midwest or like like an actual national park here in America.
Yeah.
But just gorgeous cinematography, a lot of just really creepy camera work. There's one shot in this movie that maybe I was watching it at like 12:45 at night and uh alone, and and the cats were moving in the bedroom, and then I saw this scene happen and I went and I got like legit goosebumps. Uh so I thought this movie did a really good job of just creating a tone and like it's not. I don't think this is the type of horror movie that would do financially, would not, it would probably not do well in like a wide release. But
Yeah.
I feel this is exactly the type of movie that is going to gain steam on social media, and I think it's going to get kind of like a cult following through the year, and it's going to build. And I would not be shocked if this was a movie that like showed up on like some year-end lists.
Interesting. Interesting. It's funny, Danny, because you were comparing it to Brightwood, which I totally forgot to compare it to. That's a really, really good point, right? And you're saying that it might show up on a year's best list. I feel like this end of 2023, beginning of 2024 era, we have a lot of movies that are like this right now, right? At least that we've covered on this show, right? Because we covered Brightwood, like you just said, but then we also covered The Outwaters, which I feel like there's some kind of DNA over, mixing in with this here, and then also The Seeding, which I feel like The Seeding, as far as like tone and plot and stuff, is the most different from this one than the other things that we've compared it to. But just that idea of you're trapped outside, you're in nature, you're away from society. Society's not that far away, though. You could get to society, and then like they're just sort of being like cruelty in nature and not knowing what's going on in the wilderness. That's throughout all of these movies.
Yeah, the all three of the movies, all four of the movies, they were that Lovely Dark and Deep, Brightwood, The Seeding, and all of those movies that we're discussing.
The Outwaters.
The Outwaters, yes. They delve into different types of nature, like national park, desert. In the case of Brightwood, like local park, like local woods. And I feel that one thing that links them is just that like humans are essentially powerless to nature, and nature is, no matter how much we destroy things, nature is it's too vast to and can overwhelm and take over at any time. And I happen to like that because it creates a natural dread. Like I brought this up before. When we were in California a couple of years ago, my family, I would go hiking every morning in Runyon Canyon. And when you walk into Runyon Canyon, there's people everywhere, and you see people and hi, how you? But then you put your headphones in and you start going up, a hiking trail, or you start running up and around on the sides of these like hills and mountains. And the next thing you know, you're looking around and there's nobody there, and you can see the Hollywood sign and you can see Los Angeles from like the top of the mountain. But if I would have like tripped, fallen, and broken my leg, I would have been alone. The cell phone reception was spotty, and it's like it's this weird feeling of like, oh, everything is right there, but I'm also in the friggin' woods. Yep. And I love that idea. I think it's such an easy place to go to find authentic horror.
Yes, really good point. And what's interesting about all those movies too is that even though they might have been filmed in other countries for some of them, they're all set in the United States. All those movies are like, well, you're in the United States, you could be in New York, but then you go up here and you're in this dense woods where there's demonic creatures, or you could be in California and you're in this crazy desert where you might end up cutting out your intestines or something like that, right? there's all this kind of crazy shit, and it's like it's in America, it's where we live. I think that it kind of comes back to the Blair Witch Project, right? My 13-year-old daughter is just itching for me to watch the Blair Witch Project with her. And the Blair Witch Project obviously, since it's found footage, there's so many shots where you're just looking through the camera and you're looking through the woods, and your mind is waiting to see something that's going to jump out at you, or there's going to be something creepy because you know it's a horror movie. And there's just endless shots of like looking through the woods and seeing people's reactions as they uncover things. This movie has a lot of shots of like you're in the woods. You might see a person go behind a tree and then they're just not there. You have the flashlight focusing on things in otherwise extremely dark scenes. Like I watched this on my laptop in multiple locations, and often I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" Because it was so dark. But then you'd have the flashlight just like spotlighting things. Looks like you were going to say something. Go ahead.
I think I figured out where I've heard that. Who said
Robert
the poem?
Frost.
Robert Frost.
Yeah.
Does one of the characters in Death Proof, Tarantino's Death Proof?
Oh, yeah,
say
probably. What's his name? Like Stuntman Mike, right? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got miles to go before I sleep.
Yeah, like he's at the bar and he's like hitting on yeah.
Yes, I think he has to find the girl and recite that poem in order to get a free lap dance.
There you go. There you go. I'm glad that you were thinking about Death Proof, Danny, while I was making this profound point about Blair Witch Project.
I was listening, and I'm at that stage. Charlotte and I we already like jokingly said, like, I have to stop just saying we need to watch this, and I have to start writing down like a list of movies. And Blair Witch is definitely on it.
Yeah,
like that was like a cornerstone movie, though. And
yeah.
and again, that was like, talk about like real world authentic horror.
Yeah.
In a time before the internet took off, right?
Right.
In a time before cell phones, that they were able to create the first real viral sensation, that these three actors were like actual people that got killed and lost in the woods, and that the tape we were watching in the movie theater was real. And that's why, like, I love the Blair Witch Project, but I also totally understand that it is a time capsule movie that like anyone watching the Blair Witch Project today for the first time, with everything that's been around in found footage since 1999, probably isn't going to feel the same way that we did seeing it and living through that.
Right.
But yeah, that was like, I think that you could definitely draw a parallel back to that.
Yeah,
with this movie.
It's funny because Blair Witch, obviously, we always kind of focus on the female lead. I can't remember the character's name or the actress's name, but we focus on her so much in that movie. I mean, she's on the poster, right?
Heather.
Heather. Okay. Probably. Yeah. I haven't seen it since when it first came out. But, another movie that I saw with my daughter this week was the original Alien from 1979. And so much of that is focused on Sigourney Weaver. And especially the third act, it's like Sigourney Weaver alone on the ship trying to get away. And Alien is this great example of how it's like you're literally in fucking space. And there's this creature you don't know anything about. So it's like as removed as you can get from reality. But this movie kind of has that same kind of feeling of it's this woman by herself. This very brave woman, by the way. Like it's not like she's like with a whole bunch of friends and she gets separated or all the friends get killed and she's the only one left. This is a woman that actively chooses to go stay by herself deep in the woods. And I think that they were very lucky to have Georgia Campbell play Lennon, this main
Georgina
character.
Campbell, yeah.
Oh my God, I fucked up the I knew it was Georgina. I fucked up the ticker. Let me fix it. But go ahead. Tell us about Georgina Campbell, man.
I loved her in Barbarian. And I thought she was really good in this movie at being understated. Like I feel that this is a performance where another actress could have she could have done the I Know What You Did Last Summer, what are you waiting for? Spinning around in the woods, screaming nonstop.
Yeah.
And you have this idea that this is a woman who is there with purpose. And I thought about you while I was watching this
Oh,
because
thank you.
because I know how much you hate exposition dumps, and I thought that this movie did such a good job of not giving us not giving us the dumps
Yeah.
and letting us figure out some of the things that are going through this character's mind. There's an
Yes.
interaction that she has with another park ranger named Jackson, who I think the actor's name is Nick Blood, which is just,
Correct. Correct.
Jesus Christ, that is like the coolest fucking name ever. Nick
Right.
Blood, Private Eye. But so she's like talking with him, and he kind of like hints at her backstory. So are the rumors true? And instead of going off on like a long flashback or her, he even says, I want to hear it from you because sometimes the rumors, you know, aren't what they really are. The movie doesn't do that. The movie doesn't force exposition on you. We see through the context of the movie from the very beginning. She gets to that, tiny little ranger house, and
Yeah.
she sets up her like man-made map with her, pictures on it. We understand that she has purpose in what she's doing. We understand that there is something in her backstory that gets further explained later through the imagery.
Right.
And I just really like that this movie kept it to a tight, I think it's like 87 minutes, maybe closer to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't waste any of that time expositing story that
No.
we're able to figure out. And I think that's a kudos to Teresa Sutherland for
Hmm.
trusting the audience, and I feel like that is something that she does in her writing, even having not seen
Yeah.
The Wind and hearing Chris talk about it,
Yeah.
how it's basically like a woman alone dealing with this like phenomenon. I also love the way the movie uses quotes. Like it starts off with the John Muir quote, and into the forest I go to lose my mind and find my soul.
Yeah.
Um, I love the idea of that guy Varney leaving the message that says "I owe this land a body," which is such
Oh,
a creepy thing to write. And
yes.
and I liked. I love the whole, and this is like the repeating message of the park ranger of like the leave nothing, take nothing, kill nothing.
Yeah.
So I felt like with the movie does such a good job of setting things up almost naturally without forcing unnecessary dialogue, and letting the characters and the actors, especially Georgina Campbell, because it's basically her friggin' movie, just be on screen. This is also a woman who, kind of similar to her character in Barbarian, is in the dark a lot, in tight confined spaces a lot, but this is also somebody who's putting herself there. So she's not like the scared damsel, who needs help. She's, if anything, she's too helpful at one point in the movie.
Yeah. 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 Uh it's funny because it does sort of, it kind of has this like little prologue with this other ranger, and he puts up that sign that says, "Oh, he owes this land a body." And that sets the tone right off the bat. It gives you this feeling of like, okay, there's something with the woods. The woods is it has some kind of presence in it. And then you were talking about exposition, and you were saying that like there's not these exposition dumps, which I'm very grateful for. There is this sequence that would feel like an exposition dump where she pops headphone buds into her ears, then she's walking and she's listening to podcasts, and all the podcasts are about how there's these disappearances in these wooded areas in these parks, and they mention how like it seems like it's all by this certain kind of stone. Like it's like, oh, it's by I think they say granite, but I might be wrong. Um, and so it just kind of creates a sense of foreboding when you mix up that message of I owe this land a body. Then you hear about all these missing people and that they all seem to be missing from this forest that she's in. Then it really gives you this sense of like, oh, what the fuck is going to happen here? We find out just through really inference, we kind of just like see these flashbacks that she loses her sister. I don't think it's ever like straight up just said directly that she says that she's lost her sister. And this is, kind of a spoiler. Maybe we won't have to go too much into spoilers for this movie. But that's another thing that I've noticed with the movies that you and I have covered recently. There's a lot of movies where like someone has lost a child, someone has lost, a spouse or sibling. And that's kind of the main drive of their thing. Just try to figure out what happened to someone. And to me, that's the scariest thing is when a person goes missing. I feel like that's actually scarier than like if you literally saw a person die and you're like, okay, that's my loved one that's dead. At least you know what happened to them. When someone's missing, it's like, what the fuck happened to them? And you're just sitting there never sleeping because you're just imagining what happened. That's scarier.
Yeah.
So it's not really ever explained what truly happens with these people or what is the force in the forest, right?
Yeah, and I don't think so. Again, I don't know how deep into spoilers we want to go, but I do like the idea of there's a lot of times in this movie where characters ask other characters, "Are you real?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see your ticker was like, "What's going on in Lennon's mind?"
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like this movie doesn't even tell us like her first name.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting. It kind of, but I do like the idea that the movie is kind of an unreliable narrator in a sense that we meet these characters come out of the woods or are in the woods and they've been somewhere. They don't know what is real anymore. They don't know if the people in front of them are real. People start seeing things. Can you guess the moment that I said gave me the legit creeps?
Okay. I think I can say this, even though it's kind of a spoiler. I think it's in the trailer. But you're talking about like when you see her fucking face and it's just like that big bush kind of coming out of her face.
Oh no, that wasn't even it. It was she's like in the foreground and she's like looking out into the woods and you just start seeing like somebody crawl down a tree in the back.
Okay, yes.
But yeah, the scene you're mentioning it's in like the promotional material. It's in the trailer.
Right.
And that is a scene that like screams folk horror to me. Like the idea of like, you're in the woods and to the point where it's like you don't know where you end and the woods begin. That feels very folk horror to me.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I was gonna say that like we shouldn't spoil the movie, but in a weird way, there isn't really that much to spoil, right? This movie is much more of like an experience. It's just much more of like giving you that feeling of losing your mind, being alone in the woods and losing your mind, right? It's not necessarily like, oh, these plot beats that we're worried about spoiling. Obviously the way it gets resolved, we could spoil that, so let's not go into that. But the movie kind of does deviate. At some points, we do have these visions that are not in the woods, right? And there's some really disturbing stuff in there too.
Yeah, there's a scene that reminded me of like I think it was Logan Paul who like got in trouble for going into that Japanese forest, like the suicide forest.
Oh, yes.
And there's a moment in this movie that reminded me of that, not Logan Paul, but of where one of the things that the movie focuses on is like these missing posters.
Yep.
And there's a scene where she's walking around and she's in this like dark, foggy stretch of the woods, and every tree has a missing poster on it. And I thought that was, again, a super creepy scene. yeah, this is, I like the way you put it. This is not necessarily, it's not a narrative movie. It's not, it is a narrative film, but it's not like a movie where you're going to spoil specific plot points. It's more of like an experience of kind of going mad or, you know, losing your mind in the woods. And if you get into the movie the way I think we did, you're going to start to feel that way as you go through it.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the fact that it's only, I think, 90 minutes on the dot.
Yeah.
It doesn't like overstay its welcome. I think it does a really good job of being tense and kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And then, you know, leaving you feeling like unsettled.
Yeah. I mean, but doesn't that describe a lot of the movies that you and I have covered
Yeah,
recently? A lot of modern movies. And the wackiest thing is, I think the 3 fucking screeners that we've covered for this channel recently have been Brightwood, fucking The Seeding, and this, right?
yeah.
It's like kind of like, is there a theme with these you know, screeners that we're getting here?
Well, I do think that, again, I think that these are movies that companies, production companies, or the creators want these movies to get out to people, to build an audience. Because if you just dump a movie like this into the theater, it's gonna be there for a week. It's gonna make barely any money, and then they'll be able to say, oh, it's a failure. Whereas if you make this movie, and I cannot imagine the budget on this movie was that much. I mean, it's not like sets needed to be built. It was filmed probably out in the open, in a park in Portugal, or the huge expanse that they had. Like, the one structure that we see is this tiny little house, this tiny little ranger house. So you put a movie like this out to critics. You put a movie like this out on streaming, on VOD. We didn't even mention it's on VOD. It's on Vudu right now. You could rent this movie for about $6. I haven't checked if it's on. I'm sure it's streaming everywhere, or on VOD everywhere. But I feel like the word of mouth on a movie like this will do it much better than a very short theatrical release. There was just a movie that was out in theaters. I saw, I think it was John Squires from Bloody Disgusting, mentioned it. I think it's called like Out of the Darkness.
Okay.
It's apparently this like, it's set like 10,000 years ago in like caveman time, and there's something in the woods hunting these, like, you know, hunter gatherers. And that was out at the local Regal, but for 1 week. And now it's gone. And now I have to wait for VOD. And he was like talking about how it's a shame nobody saw it. And my reaction was, not only didn't I see it, but I never heard anything about it. Like, it was not promoted. It like, and now I'm going to watch that movie on VOD because, you know, people I trust in the horror community are talking about it.
Right.
But I feel like, had this Lovely Dark and Deep gone into the theater, or, you know, we would have probably seen the same thing. Right. So get these movies out streaming on VOD for, you know, $5-6 to rent. Get the word of mouth going on them, and I think that's a much better. You know, you asked why are these movies all very similar. I don't know what the target audience for this is, other than just horror fans, right?
Yeah.
Like, when horror movies make tons of money in the box office, it's usually because there's something to attract the general audience aside from just the horror fan.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's like The Conjuring, or it's part of like a bigger, you know, franchise, or you know, Halloween, you know, something like that, where they're going to make a ton of money.
Yeah. I think that maybe the reason why we're seeing a lot of these movies too is because even though we are like out of COVID or like we're not in that kind of COVID world anymore, I think that these movies were probably at least conceived while COVID was still going on.
Well, did you notice the dates that she put on Georgina Campbell leaves notes on the Ranger house, and
Okay,
every note had a date. And apparently she was out there from like June to November, June to September of 2021.
oh, there you go. Okay,
So
yeah,
I think that could also play a part in what
yeah. Right, because if you're making a movie like this, it's like, well, how can you film a movie with COVID? And like, maybe we were coming out of COVID when some of these movies were being at least thought about, but like, they're thinking of like, okay, well, we can't have people close by, we can't have a lot of people in a room, so like, we'll make them outdoors, and it's good because like working within these constraints of COVID have made these really kind of atmospheric experience movies that don't require a lot of dialogue, but they just stick with you and they hit and they haunt you. And you might not remember this whole movie. You might not be like quoting this movie, but you probably will be remembering like a specific shot or something. You'll be like, oh, you know,
yeah.
and that's that. Sometimes that's a big accomplishment for a movie that has a small budget, a small release of something like this. You know,
Yeah, I think over the last 4 years, we started this channel almost as a result of
of
COVID.
COVID. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And hey, we're going to be stuck in our houses.
Yeah,
Want to get online and talk about movies together.
yes.
And uh, I think that we have seen a lot more really good low budget independent movies over the
Shit,
last couple of years.
shit, yeah.
Uh, no, I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
Uh,
man. We're just oh good.
no, there's just something about the Ranger house, that like little box shaped house with the triangle
Yeah,
roof,
yeah.
that creeps me out. It again, maybe it's the city kid in me. I'm speaking to you from even though it looks like I'm in a log cabin, I'm speaking to you from a sixth floor apartment in Brooklyn, New York.
Right, right.
And there is just something creepy about like that tiny little box country house with the triangle shaped roof. It reminds me of like Gretel and Hansel and that like, fairy tale like monster or witch lives in that house. And I always love when a movie like frames it like that.
Yeah.
I, I like that.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Ari Aster did a great job with that in Midsummer.
Yep.
Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, dude, we're both from the boroughs. I'm from Staten Island and you're from Brooklyn. Like the woods, the deep woods. No, we're good, man. That's some fucking scary shit right there. You know? I mean, just staying in those tents with the zippers and stuff, like she's in those tents a couple of times. I'm like, fuck that. And of course, they have to have that sequence where there's a thing outside the tent. You don't know what the fuck it is. I'm like, nope, that's my nightmare right there. Um,
yeah, I'd almost rather sleep outside than in a tent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, because if something happens and I'm outside, I can get up and run. Whereas if
Yes.
I'm in a tent, I have to worry about a zipper.
Yeah.
No.
There might be a thing stabbing you through the tent. There might be Jason taking you out in a sleeping bag and smashing you into a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we are moving past our little discussion of Lovely, Dark, and Deep. And now we can say what's coming up on our sexy ass show. Danny, you want to tell them what to expect on our channel?
Yeah, we've been covering some Dario Argento this month. Shudder just released a new documentary about his life and films called Panico. I did a short review of that. That's up on the channel. We've done deep dives of Tenebrae and Deep Red. Deep Red hasn't posted yet, right?
Monday.
Monday. The Deep
Yeah.
Red will be up on Monday, and then we are going to round this out by covering probably his last great movie, Opera from 1988. So that's what you can look forward to. If you want to look back, we have our True Detective We covered all 6 episodes of True Detective, including the finale. We were joined by our good friend and former co-host Chris, Future Boy Chris, for that. We also I have a bunch of shorts up on the channel. I'm going to be starting a new, not a new thing, but like I'm gonna just start covering a lot of Tubi horror
Yes.
because I play a lot of horror trivia, and the best thing about horror trivia is it either reminds you of movies you want to rewatch, or it gives you the names of movies that you want to go home and watch. And
Right.
weirdly, most of those movies are on Tubi, which is a totally free streaming service that has, you know, its horror collection is kind of ridiculous. It has popular movies, but then it has the deep cuts, and then it has the really like D, C, and B level deep cuts. So I think I've watched like 3 or 4 horror movies just in the last couple days. I'm about to start Insect from 1987. So
oh boy. Oh
yeah.
boy. Yeah, didn't you say you watched some movie like a cockroach movie recently?
Yeah, The Nest
The
from
Nest, there you go.
1988 with some absolutely insane practical effects towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, giant mutated cockroaches.
Nice.
Really
nice.
good. And all free on Tubi. Yes.
Yes, and you guys get to get this content free on here too. Just Danny talking about movies like multiple times a week if you subscribe to the Lastercast. So, guys, it's been lovely, dark, and deep to spend this time with you. We'll be back with some Argento, and we'll see you real soon.